Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to get into something that's all around us, shaping pretty much everything we do, the philosophy of law. You might hear it called jurisprudence, but really, it's just about asking some really big questions about the rules that run our lives. Everything from huge constitutional questions all the way down to that annoying little parking sign on your street.
So let's start right there. Think about the last time you got a parking ticket. You're holding this little slip of paper, and you probably had that thought flicker through your mind. Wait a second, why does this piece of paper actually have any power over me? What gives this rule any real authority? That feeling right there, that question, that's the rabbit hole we're about to go down. It's the beginning of the entire philosophy of law.
So, here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll get a handle on what legal philosophy even is. Then, we're going to jump into this huge, centuries-old debate. Are laws based on some kind of morality, or are they just commands from a person in power? After that, we'll see how these ideas hold up when we talk about punishment. Is it about creating a better society, or is it more, an eye for an eye? And finally, we'll see if there's any way to kind of bridge that gap.
Okay, so first things first. What in the world is jurisprudence? Well, in a nutshell, it's the theoretical side of law. It's where legal thinkers take a big step back from the day-to-day cases and ask the really fundamental questions, like, what is law really? And maybe the bigger one, what should law be?
And that question, what is law, it throws us right into one of the oldest and deepest arguments in all of philosophy. Where does the law get its power? What makes a rule an actual law and not just, a suggestion?
All right, so you've basically got two heavyweight contenders here. On one side, you have the natural law camp. These guys argue that law and morality are fundamentally linked. They believe there are some basic universal truths about right and wrong, and for a rule to be considered a real law, it has to line up with that morality. But on the other side, you've got legal positivism, and they say, whoa, not so fast. For them, a law is a law because it was made by the right people following the right process. Whether it's a good law or a bad law, that's a totally different conversation.
This right here is the classic battle cry of the natural law tradition, and it's often tied to the philosopher Thomas Aquinas. An unjust law is no law at all. Think about what that means. If a government passed a law that was just fundamentally evil, like it ordered you to harm innocent people, a natural law theorist would say that's not just a bad law, it's not a valid law at all. It's missing the very thing that makes a law a law.
But a legal positivist, like John Austin, he would completely push back on that. This quote from him sums up their view perfectly. The existence of law is one thing, its merit and demerit another. A positivist could look at that same horrible, evil law and say, look, I agree this law is morally wrong, it's terrible, but because it was passed by Congress and signed by the president, I'm sorry, but it is a valid law. See the difference? For them, legality and morality are two separate boxes.
Okay, so we've got these two big, clashing ideas about what law is. But theories are one thing. Where the rubber really meets the road is when someone breaks a law. The ultimate test for any of these philosophies is how it explains and justifies punishment.
And this gets us to our next core question. When somebody commits a crime, what are we actually trying to do by punishing them? Are we trying to get revenge, make society safer, teach them a lesson? Your answer to that question says a whole lot about what you think law is for.
So let's dive into the first big answer to that question. It's a view that is all about looking forward to the future. This is the utilitarian take on punishment, and it says we should punish people in whatever way creates the best outcome for the most people down the road.
At its heart, utilitarianism is all about the consequences. It's a results-oriented philosophy. When it comes to law, that means you judge a law or a punishment based on what it accomplishes. The goal isn't some high-minded idea of cosmic justice. It's practical. It's about making society happier, safer, and better off. The crime that happened in the past? That only matters if punishing it helps create a better future.
Now, what's really interesting is how utilitarians justify punishment. A thinker like Jeremy Bentham actually thought of punishment as a kind of evil because, well, it causes suffering. So for him, it's only okay if it prevents an even bigger evil. And it does that in three main ways. First, simple cost-benefit. You lock up dangerous people to keep the rest of us safe. Second, deterrence. You make the punishment scary enough that other people won't want to commit the same crime. And third, rehabilitation. You try to turn the criminal into someone who can be a productive member of society.
And we see this deterrence idea in action all over the place. Some of these examples are pretty intense, right? Caning for graffiti in Singapore or amputation for theft in Saudi Arabia. Those are designed to be so terrifying that the thought of the punishment alone stops the crime.
But you see softer versions too, like in the US, where a judge might make a drunk driver put a bumper sticker on their car to publicly shame them. It's all about sending a message.
But here's the thing. Does this forward-looking, let's scare 'em straight approach always work? Oh, not even close. This example from Oklahoma is just perfect. The police created a local TV show called Shame TV, where they broadcast the mugshots of people arrested for prostitution. The goal was deterrence through public humiliation. But it backfired, spectacularly. The show basically became free advertising for the prostitutes. It's a great reminder that predicting human behavior is really, really tricky.
And that leads us to some of the really deep and frankly kind of scary problems with pure utilitarianism. I mean, think it through. If your only goal is the greatest good for the greatest number, could you justify framing and punishing an innocent person if it would stop a massive deadly riot? The cold hard math of utilitarianism might say, yeah. On the flip side, it might also mean letting a guilty person walk free if punishing them would cause a huge public backlash. At the end of the day, critics say utilitarianism cuts the connection between punishment and what a person actually deserves. It just treats people like tools for making society better.
So let's look at the main alternative. If utilitarianism is all about looking forward to create a better future, this next theory, retributionism, looks firmly backward. It focuses only on the crime that's already been committed. For a retributivist, punishment is justified for one reason and one reason only, because the person who did the wrong thing deserves it. Period. This isn't about making society safer or rehabilitating anyone. It's about moral balance. It's about justice. You've heard the classic phrase, lex talionis, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. The punishment is just the criminal paying their moral debt to society.
But this whole idea of deserving something, it can get really complicated really fast. Let me give you a classic thought experiment. Imagine 3 different people all commit the exact same wrongful act. They choose to drive home drunk. But because of pure, dumb luck, the outcomes are completely different. How does a retributivist deal with that?
This table just lays the problem out so clearly. Driver number 1 gets lucky, gets pulled over, nobody gets hurt. Driver 2 skids on a wet patch and hits a telephone pole. Driver 3, on that same road moments later, skids in the same way, but tragically kills a family of 4. Now, all 3 of them made the same bad choice. They had the same wrongful intent. So does the one who got lucky deserve just a slap on the wrist, while the one who got unlucky deserves to spend their life in prison? Our legal system usually says yes. But for a theory that's all about what people deserve for their actions, this is a huge problem. It seems like we're punishing people for bad luck.
And the problems don't end there. Critics ask some pretty tough questions, like, what is the moral point of inflicting suffering if it doesn't do any good for the future? And how exactly do you apply an eye for an eye to a crime like fraud or perjury? And does this theory, which is all about moral wrongdoing, even make sense for punishing stuff like parking violations or jaywalking? Those things are illegal for public order, not because they're deeply immoral acts.
So where does that leave us? We have 2 really powerful theories, but both seem to have some pretty serious flaws. Utilitarianism can seem cold and calculating, and retributionism can feel rigid and sometimes miss the point. So naturally, a lot of thinkers have tried to find some sort of middle ground.
And one of the most famous attempts to do this came from the philosopher John Rawls. He came up with this really clever mixed theory. He said, look, let's use both ideas, but let's use them to answer different questions. First question, why should we have a system of punishment at all? The answer, he said, is utilitarian, to keep society orderly and safe. But then you ask a second, different question. Why are we punishing this specific person? And for that, the answer is retributive, because they broke the law and they deserve to be punished. It's a way to get the best of both worlds, a system that works for the greater good, but that also respects individual justice.
And that brings us right back to the central tension at the heart of it all. What is our legal system ultimately for? Is it a forward-looking tool designed to engineer a better, safer future for everyone? Or is it a backward-looking institution whose main job is to settle the moral debts of the past and make sure everyone gets what they have coming to them? Our real-world system tries to do both, and it's often a messy, imperfect compromise. And wrestling with that deep conflict is the never-ending challenge of the law.